So I think there's a discussion on that, how dogma turned to cult, and the positive aspect of it in terms of asking for change, responding to people's needs, and how it is agile. So there's something there that the dynamic, I think, nature of that discussion is the most interesting versus the tags of cult, cultish, etc. So it's more the opening the conversation on, moving, first of all, using maybe dogma, and I might be wrong, but I would like us to comment on this, please, the difference between cult and dogma and the whole thing. Thank you.
Well, dogma is very attractive to people because they've simplified things down to a dogma, which they then stick to, and that is a sort of the essence of. All cults have their dogma, and if you digress from it, you're kicked out of the cult, you're encouraged to separate from your families, for example, because they don't share the same dogma. But cults, they are built on dogma. I think you're right, really. But somehow, talking about the word cult brings in more aspects of this type of human behavior than just calling them dogmas. And there are conspiracy theories which become cults, like this old lady, she's obviously bought into some conspiracy theory about a pandemic, ignoring the history that pandemics have existed, throughout human history. To say they were planned would be ridiculous. And this isn't a particularly bad pandemic, actually. It's a lot less fearsome than a lot of the pandemics we've had in the past. So to think that it's part of an attempt at world government, I can see how that could be attractive because of the stupid things a lot of governments have been doing. But it's yes, whether that class is a cult or not.
Also, Fadi, I right from the beginning, I know the word cult triggers pejorative reactions. Okay, so I understand why you would not want to use that term, as you said, to kind of tag stuff. But but just a couple of quick comments. One is that, as Ivan said, the way we're using the term cult is a wider catch of human behavior than just dogma. That's number one. Number two, maybe an example is illustrative. Arthur Dykman, the author of the book that we're referring to, wrote the book because of the following experience. He was part of the anti-nuclear weapons movement in the 60s. Okay, he was a peacenik and trying to get the United States to disarm. He's a psychiatrist, by the way. And then he started reading about the fact that it was possible that in a nuclear war, 100 million Americans would survive and they wouldn't have to figure out how to survive. When he mentioned this to his peacenik group, that maybe we should consider Plan B, he was rejected. Then he realized that cult behavior is a lot more common than just in extreme groups, rail, etc., Fadi. So I think that's part of our point here. As I said right from the start, there are 2 points. One is that there is a risk of big cult hijack in this era. That's number one. Number two is cult behavior is a lot more pervasive than it looks. And we're using the word cult to explain that. I suppose you could use another term, by the way. There's nothing magical about the term cult. But the fundamental point that I would really stress politically, and I do think this is extremely important, if we're not able to switch from monolithic fixated modes of thinking in politics, you call it dogma, we call it cult, to a more flexible mindset, we're going to have a lot of problems, a lot of societal problems. It's that straightforward. And raising awareness of how we get fixated is what we're trying to do.
And that's what's so dangerous is going on in American and certainly UK universities where people are no platformed or cancelled because you stop the spread and sharing of dissenting views and different views. You have to have different viewpoints. If you have only one viewpoint and anyone who disagrees with it is cancelled, that is very cultish and very dangerous behaviour, but it's quite common now in some of our universities, and it's very common in America apparently. That is pretty terrifying. That's the sort of thing the fascists did, rounding up people and cancelling them. And it follows an ancient pattern, excommunication, in the Catholic Church. People were excommunicated, and which destroyed their reputation. Sometimes their lives were taken when they were excommunicated. They couldn't earn a living as priests or anything because they'd gone against the Catholic dogma. And it's the same thing. It's the same primitive pattern that's coming out today in this cancel culture. And it's a big setback for humanity, I think.